Hi, I'm Henry Seltzer. I founded Astrograph software in 1995 and the TimePassages software, which we've been selling ever since then. And a lot of water under the bridge since then. We've done quite a bit with the software. And I do want to show you a few tips and advanced techniques that you might not otherwise know about, that even experienced users of TimePassages may not know about, because these things are not obvious. So I demo them typically at conferences such as Norwalk. And I'm going to be showing you right now in a video so that you can see them for yourself. So let's go ahead and look at a chart. And you should be able to see. I brought up the chart of Greta Thunberg because she's so topical, and it's very interesting right now in terms of new planets. I'll just mention briefly that she is a perfect exemplar of Eris, which is, fairly new to astrology. Most astrologers are starting to work with Eris. My take on Eris, that it's a feminine warrior archetype, has been proven out time and time again. And there's plenty of details in the book I wrote, which is called The 10th Planet, about Eris. Just to show you, here she is, a perfect example of a feminine warrior. At 15, addressing the UN and telling them they're screwing up, addressing the leaders of the world, and telling them how badly they're screwing up. She's passionate about what her beliefs are, her deep beliefs, and this is the hallmark of Eris. It's a feminine warrior energy for soul intention. Where it lies in your chart is very important. Strong exemplars of Eris. I couldn't find a feminist leader in the last 200 years that didn't have strong Eris. Paradigm shifters such as Einstein, Copernicus, Newton. Just to let you know, and I'm going to show you more details about techniques in a second, when I first saw what she was up to, I knew she was a good exemplar of Eris without looking at the chart. It was very obvious from the way she exemplifies the archetype. And you can see that she has a close trine between Eris and Pluto, also with Jupiter involved, a grand trine in fire. Also a yod between Maki, that's another one of these new planets, which corresponds to a profound connection with nature. And both Haumea, which is this glyph, and Maki, which is this glyph, do correspond to profound connection with nature, with Maki being the more activist, as I always say, environmentally active, potentially environmental activist. So having that at 19 degrees, same degree as her Eris, in a yod with Mars at 21 Scorpio to Eris, was very gratifying, because it just brings out my understanding of these archetypes completely. I mean, this is a brand new example beyond what I put in the the Mountain Astrologer article that was published in the April-May edition of the Mountain Astrologer, current edition, as of the time of this recording. So just to let you know, these are some very interesting archetypes which are now able to be shown very easily in the chart. You can take them away or put them in. So that's one of the techniques I'll show you. You can choose under chart points, under the display options, to either include Eris and TNOs or not. And if I don't include them, they won't be there. I do keep Eris in the chart always. That's my choice. You can edit those. Putting them back in, just to put them back. Let me just show you also the way some of the way you can look around the chart. So the thicker lines in the middle of the chart are the closer aspects. So if I put the mouse on, you can see, if you look in the status line below, Jupiter in strong trine, 1.7 degrees with Pluto. So it tells you how close it is. You click, you get an interpretation of that, a Jupiter trine Pluto in a natal situation. And then also, you will want to note that besides the longitudinal aspects that we can show in the normal wheel, if you were to right-click on something like Uranus, for example, we find that Uranus in her chart is parallel to Pluto. So she does partake of that Pluto, that Uranus-Pluto, similar to the 60s. She has that attitude of making the society reflect a wider appreciation of values and of spiritual values, perhaps, or just a different way of doing things. The 60s, hallmark of the 60s. And the parallel is because her declination of Uranus is minus 13.4, 13 degrees, 22 minutes. If we were to right-click on Pluto, you'd see that, yes, 13.8. So they are about within half a degree. They are parallel. Just gives you an added dimension to the chart, and making it very easy to determine without having to look at a report on the declinations and a listing of those. This is the vertical dimension in the sky celestial latitude as opposed to the longitude, which is the way we do the normal aspects. Another nice thing you can do is if you're looking at transits, which you could do transits for right now, you could also, of course, do a transit for any date. You could edit the transit date, obviously. But looking at this transit position, let's just look at Pluto. If we were to right-click on it, we would see the next station. So it's very helpful to know that it will station direct, not till October, at 22 Capricorn. So it moves a little bit further back. It will not go very far back in Capricorn at all. Just good to know. And by the way, I'd like to show you something else. You can also do the right click on the planetary lines, the aspect lines. And I do the lines direct to the biwheel planets. There's an option that makes them all just appear in the center of the chart. But then it's very hard to see which one corresponds to which. This way you can easily see, but you can't see the planets in the natal chart very well, but you can see that this is a transiting Pluto because you can see where the line goes. And if you look at the status line below, you can see it's Pluto sextile natal Venus. Or Venus is at 25 Scorpio. And we can look at that in a couple of different ways, and I'll show you that's the right click. So if I right click on this aspect line, it shows we can get the normal aspect Pluto sextile natal Venus, and we give a date range for that, of course. And that's what you get also if you left click on the line. But if you right click on the line, you also get the possibility of seeing aspects to house rulers, either the 5th house ruler, because Venus is the ruler of Taurus, which is the 5th house in her chart, by the sunrise chart, by the way. We don't know her time. And then it's also the 10th house by Libra. So when you click on that, you actually get a different interpretation of the same transit because you can see this relates to the 5th house. So that's another way of looking at the transit. I think that's a very useful way to do it. We also want to mention that you can easily look at single planet aspects. So in this transiting situation, if I wanted to look at single planet, there's a key combination to get that, and then it says select planet. And then when I put the mouse, you can only see the transiting Pluto or the transiting Jupiter in this case. You can keep moving around. This works nicely also in the natal situation. If I'm looking at the natal chart, you can see these different things, like here's your natal Pluto is in that grand trine, and it also squares, obviously, the Maki-Maki and Virgo. But you can keep looking at these. Now, if you click on it, you can stop and examine each aspect in turn, and you can get an interpretation up if you wanted to. But then you can command click and go back to this other mode where you can just examine any planet natally and see the connections that it's making. So I think that's very nice, very handy. Like I say, it's documented in the manual and you can see it in the display menu, but a lot of people still don't know that you can do this in the software. Now, for another feature of the software, I'm going to bring up another chart. So I'd like to bring up Edgar Cayce's chart. And here we go. Now, the reason I brought up Edgar Cayce is because a close examining is supposed to be 3 p.m. local mean time in Hopkinsville, Kentucky on March 18th, 1877. And interestingly, he has the moon at the top of the chart. And in TimePassages, any other software will not do this. We put that in the 10th house optionally. We call that house margin, and we can set it up to 3 degrees or 5 degrees or 0 if you don't want to see this. You would just go to the preferences, display options. You could check house margin, and you could put it to whatever value you want. But we'll leave it at 3, and the point being, this moon, if you think about Edgar Cayce, of course he became world famous as a psychic. He would go into trance, he would go to sleep, so his unconscious was being invoked. And the moon at the top of the chart isn't that significant. He also, of course, has Pluto there, and also this new planet, which is Haumea, which is also there, which is conjunct to Pluto by chance. And we could get into that another time. But the point I'd like to show you is that with this house margin setting, you can see this as a 10th house item, the moon in the 10th. And I just think that's most astrologers appreciate that. I've had so many tell me that that's exactly the right way to do it. But again, most software won't do it. They'll put it where you can see the little tick mark here, which is where it actually lies in connection with this midheaven. So the fact that we put it on the other side where it belongs in terms of the fact that it's a 10th house item is a kind of a tricky thing that the software will do for you. And I would like to mention as well, let's go back to Greta, that you can get interpretations for Iris actually in this standard edition of TimePassages or the advanced edition. We have very good interpretations of Iris in the house according to this notion of the feminine warrior for soul intention. The people really appreciate. I've had so many people tell me how right on they are. And anytime you see Iris with another planet, Iris with Pluto is particularly strong in their activity. You know, it's they're kind of a little steamroller, as Greta actually indicates by her actions. Anytime you see Iris with Mercury, it's usually a writer, very articulate person. They have a strong Mercury. And you can also see that coming up in parallels, not in this case. But so I just wanted to let you know that we do have those interpretations for Iris and that we have a certain amount of information for these new ones, which are very interesting, by the way. They do refer to nature, which is Haumea, which is near the top of her particular, if we do it equal house based on the sunrise time, it's right near the top of the chart, the 10th house. And also Maki Maki, as I was talking about. So we can get into that at another time. But I think that summarizes what I wanted to let you know, that we do have quite a few techniques that are unique to TimePassages that other software doesn't have. We stress ease of use. So we have all the techniques that the more complicated software has, but it's a lot easier to get to them. And that's what I wanted to explain. So that's what I wanted to share, and thanks for listening.